I'm going to be reading out the final portion of this particular review of the entire Trial of a Time Lord saga. This is a very positive perspective of the entire perspective from Tim Roll Pickering from the 21st of the 6th, 03. He titled his review, "It's the Music That Does It For Me," but we're just going to read out the final few paragraphs. The plot has been criticised for being convoluted, yet it does make perfect sense if one accepts that, as it becomes clear throughout the story. Since the coup on Gallifrey, rights have been diminished and justice has become increasingly arbitrary. The logic of trying the Doctor for an action he will commit in his future, and thereby judging whether or not to allow that event to take place, does make sense when one thinks about it. As for Mel departing with the Doctor before they've even met, this could possibly be a sign that the Doctor is trying to change his future, or merely that he is taking her back to his future self. As for the Valiard, this is best left ambiguous and thus creates greater scope. All that's necessary is that he is a representation of the Doctor's darker side. The one thing that's really missing is a proper sense of what's happening on Gallifrey, since the verbal reports are minimal. But even then, this allows the Doctor to suggest the Inquisitor to stand for Lord President, as she's clearly untainted by events back home. There are a huge number of notable performances in the story, but there are strong performances from Linda Bellingham, the Inquisitor, Michael Jaston, the Valiard, and Tony Selby, Glitz, each bringing their own distinctive touches to make the regular characters stand out. Discussing the many other members of the cast would take forever, but Brian Blessed gives an excellent performance as Yukanos, fully imbuing the warrior with passion. Each segment of evidence is interesting in its own right and shows a worrying situation in which the Doctor can save the planet Earth and even the entire universe, but when it comes to saving his companion, he is less successful, regardless of whether or not Yukanos was able to save Perry. The Doctor's own evidence is an extremely traditional story in which he is dragged into the events and eventually given a direct appeal by the Commodore, thus showing how his interference is justified as being the only thing that can prevent certain danger, and that this is acknowledged as so by those in authority. The Valiard's first segment of evidence establishes the Ravalox scenario, and this works as part of the evidence rather than as a story in its own right because it keeps the audience guessing. Unfortunately, the second segment has far too many courtroom scenes, some of which just pad out events whilst others serve to cut out sequences through narration. The result is a good piece of evidence, but not as effective a piece of drama. Dramatic moments are strong throughout the series nevertheless, with some highly memorable cliffhangers. Part 3, the crossbow is actually fired. Part 5, what will happen to the Doctor's mind. Part 8, Perry's dead. Part 9, Mel screaming as she gets caught in a death trap. Part 10, the mutant in the isolation room revealed. Part 12, the Valiard raises the charge of genocide. Part 13, the Doctor is pulled into quicksand. And Part 14, the Valiard has survived. Equally, there are many magic moments, like the one in Part 1 where Perry faces the fact that her world as she knows it has been destroyed, and she is walking through its ruins. Both Perry and Mel have a good relationship with the Doctor that is free from the ongoing bickering of earlier seasons and shows how the series has grown up beyond such adolescent roots. With several writers, directors, and musicians, there are some notable variances of style throughout the story, but these are not significant enough to render it disjointed, though the practice of many fans treating it as four stories does give rise to this in some ways. Viewed individually, each of the segments falls short, but when the entire story is viewed together, there is the reward of watching a wonderful epic that summarizes the series and presents at its end a free and matured Doctor to once more go out and save the universe. If only Colin Baker hadn't been sacked. This story is ambitious, but it works well. Definitely worth viewing.